welcome Sebastian Rusk.
Thank you so much. It's all great to see you again. Lots of familiar faces, lots of new faces. So great to be with all of you today. Podcasting will change your life and your business if you let it. Friends, I say that in confidence because I've had the unique privilege of being able to help people become who they want to be in business and in life because they started a podcast. We began this journey 7 years ago because I knew that there was more to just this social media game. Raise your hand if you're still confused about the social media content game and what you should be doing for your business. Yeah, I mean, it's a majority of us. Why? Because there's a lot. We got TikTok, we got Instagram, we got Snapchat, YouTube, MySpace. Just making sure you're paying attention. And I thought, well, what does it look like to focus on one platform, a podcast? And then we can take the content from the podcast being recorded, the audio version, the video version, and we can repurpose that into other micro content to complete all of our social media content goals. So I set on this journey 7 years ago and I said, you know, I'm gonna figure this out. I had not figured out what my life's work was yet, but I knew it was coming. It was close by. Should I close? And in 2016, I had a friend call me and say, Sebastian, can you help me start a podcast? And when I say that, ding, went off. And that was it. I'll never forget. I was standing on Ponce de Leon right next to Target where my studio was. I went back upstairs. I took out 3 sheets of paper and I said, we're going to call it the Podcast Launch Lab. And it's going to help people go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less by starting a podcast. And then we're going to support them ongoing. And I never stopped with that conversation from that day forward. Everyone's like, you're crazy. Nobody wants a podcast. Are you nuts? See how much pushback I got? That let me know I was in the right place. Here we are 7 years later. Podcasting has become my life's work. I know it because I wake up in the morning and my feet hit the floor and I go, I really get to do this every day? And I answer the question, yes, I do. And I'd also do it for free if money didn't exist, but thank God that it does this because I have a serious sneaker addiction. So here we are in 2022, and I had a client tell me last week we were at an event together in Dallas, and she was introducing me to somebody, and she said, Sebastian, what you do has very little to do with podcasting. And I go, there we go. That's right. Because podcasting will change your life and your business if you let it. Not only do I have the experience of helping people make that a reality for themselves for the past 7 years, but I've lived it for the past 12 years. The story started 12 years ago when I had a bus pass, some bow ties, and an unburning desire to want to succeed and figure something out. I had lost everything with the recession, and I had to figure it out. So I started a social media company in 2010. I would walk over to Morton's and to Fleming's and to other places, and I would convince the event person to let me bring my people to their location in exchange for passed around appetizers and a cocktail. And for some crazy reason, they let me do it every single time. And it worked out well. I would always say, your people will meet my people, we'll bring some sponsors in. Oh, and by the way, I need that back room at Fleming's too, because I'm gonna bring everybody back tomorrow for a social media boot camp. And I would bring everybody from the networking event into my social media boot camp, teach them everything I know about social media as they stare at me like I have 10 heads and boogers in 2010, telling them that they need a Twitter account for their business. But here we are, 12 years later, and a lot of those individuals at that boot camp still have a social media strategy, still believe in not only what I was doing and what I was preaching, but now they believe in themselves and making it possible. But I knew there was more, and that's where I found podcasting. Oddly enough, I grew up in a radio station. My dad was a DJ for 30 years, and I used to spend weekends in the radio station cutting tracks for the children's program in exchange for a Happy Meal. Now, I had no desire to follow in the old man's footsteps, but a buddy told me on the golf course a couple months ago when I shared that story, wow, our genes sure are powerful, aren't they? And I said, I've never even thought about my genes before, but yeah, I guess they are. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a 43-year-old empty nester. I spent the past 18 years of my life raising my daughter by myself. I put her in college. She's graduating this December with a degree in psychology. Let's go! And no one needs me home for dinner, all right? It's a great place to be. And a great place to be. Let me tell you, all my married buddies are very envious. They just don't admit it. So let's talk about what it means to start a podcast for your business. What does it take, Sebastian? I mean, I have an idea. Talk to a friend about it. Let's talk about what it doesn't take real quick. What it doesn't take are those ideas that we think are really good. Well, my girlfriends and I are really funny when we drink wine. If we just hit record, it'd be a great podcast. That's a terrible idea. Well, I kind of want to start a variety show. They went out when Johnny Carson was done. We got to figure out something that is complimentary of your personality, of you, and maybe your brand. Now, this is a very unpopular opinion, but your podcast does not need to be about your business at all. I had somebody hit me up this morning, want to start a mortgage podcast. I go, I'd rather wake up in the morning and punch myself in the face than listen to a mortgage podcast. She was taken back. I'm like, you asked for feedback. I'd be doing you a disservice to say otherwise. Well, what's your suggestion? I go, I don't know. What's your thing? Do you have a hobby? What do you like to do? You like to buy shoes? You like to shop? You like to go on vacation? You like to drink wine? Maybe there's something that complements your brand, but doesn't necessarily have to be about your brand. A lot of us do stuff a lot of us may be involved in businesses or own businesses or work for businesses that aren't that exciting. There's a lot of, if you're an attorney, you're a necessity. It's not really exciting, but you're an absolute necessity, and you always will be. So what does it look like to create a podcast for your law firm that has nothing to do with law? Is that resonating with everybody? If you think about something that complements your brand, because that's the world we're living in. My buddy Brian, I forgot what his last name is. We're really buddies, I swear. Wrote a book called H to H. And then B2B is dead, and B2C is dead. It's all about H to H. You can probably guess what that is. Anybody know what H to H means?
Human to human.
There we go. Human to human, because we want to experience the person. And even if B2C and B2B is still a thing, behind every C is a B, and behind every B is a C. Meaning that if you're interacting in a business-to-business front, cool. But there's still a consumer behind there. Same applies on the consumer front. So what's it take to start a podcast? Well, first thing, let's come up with an idea that's actually viable. Like, can we talk about something that people would be interested in? And it doesn't have to be something that's uber popular. My good friend Gary Vee said, if you like Smurfs, Smurf it up. I'm aging myself now because I watched the Smurfs as a youngster. But the point is, you don't have to be wildly popular with whatever your thing is on what you want to talk about. You just got to come up with something that complements. Let me give you a couple examples. Got a manufacturer, an employee benefits company in Louisville, Kentucky. And they handle employee benefits for all the manufacturers in Kentucky. Kentucky makes some really cool stuff. I thought it was thoroughbreds and bourbon. No, they make some really cool stuff. So we started a show called Built in the Bluegrass, and they interview all of their existing clients to talk about them and tell their story of the really cool things that are built in Louisville, Kentucky. This does a couple things. They didn't launch the podcast to find new clients. That's going to happen anyway. They did it to feature their existing clients. But then they also did it to edify themselves with the Manufacturer Association of Kentucky, the biggest organization in the state that oversees all of the manufacturers, which are in turn their niche market. Got another CPA. We launched her podcast. Met her in Las Vegas at an event. She's in my mastermind group, and just an incredible CPA. Another extremely boring business until she calls and says, "Here's how you can save some money on your taxes." And you're like, "Well, this is really cool." She launched a podcast called Life Changing Money, and she interviews individuals that have accumulated a certain amount of wealth and success in their business, and they tell stories of how their life was radically changed because of that success. When you really made the money that altered your entire path of what you would do for your life and your business. So I want to share a couple of those examples so you guys understand there are opportunities to create a podcast that complement your brand. It doesn't have to be about your brand. All right. So next step, what kind of show is it going to be? Are we going to interview people? Are you going to share your expertise? Are we going to mix it up a little bit? Some interviews, some sharing my expertise. Great strategy, by the way. And then you got to figure out what you're going to talk about. Now, disclosure. If you got that, if you've ever thought, I want to start a podcast and I need a co-host, abort mission. Mayday, mayday, I come to you from the future. It's a terrible idea. You know why? Because people change their minds, that's why. And one day somebody don't want to be a co-host anymore. Or one day somebody's always late to the recording. Or one day I don't like blue, I like pink. I don't like pink, I like blue. We're human beings. It's very difficult to agree at all times. So when thinking, let's bring on a co-host, I caution you to proceed with caution. It's a terrible idea. Now, can you invite a co-host on every now and then for your show? Absolutely. That keeps you in the driver's seat, and you don't have to depend on the co-host not showing up or not agreeing. I say this because I clean up so many co-host messes, and they get to me after. They don't get to me before, but the shows that we help start, I strongly encourage that not to happen. So figure out what you want to do, what your thing is, and I can assure you, you got this, okay? Next up, how many times a week am I going to record? The key is to be able to record as many episodes as you can on a couple of specific days, and then you're done. That way you don't have to worry about every single week, what am I going to talk about this week? That's the fast track to hating your podcast, is knowing that you have to record every single week. So, but saying, hey, listen, twice a month on Saturday mornings, I get up and I bang out 2 to 3 episodes. I've got 4 to 6 in the hopper. I put 1 out a week, and I'm constantly ahead of the game. That is a win-win strategy. That's what we teach at the Podcast Launch Lab, because it helps remove any potential friction that could be taking place in the podcast process. These guys are real active with the water. Round of applause for these guys with the water. And coffee. Okay, good. There was a mild bit of sarcasm there, but some of you picked up what I was putting down. Equipment. You don't need to go out and build a recording studio. Nobody needs to do any of that. You go on Amazon, you buy yourself a Blue Yeti USB mic for $100. It plugs right into your computer. Great audio quality. There's a couple of other, if you really wanted to swing for the fences, maybe spend $600 or $700 on the best of the best out there. But these days it's pretty common to have something. You want an ease of use to be able to say, hey, if I plug it in, my computer's going to recognize it, Zoom's going to recognize it, and I'm going to be off to the races on here. How you record it? Zoom is about 95% of all podcasts being recorded these days. Thank you, pandemic. Everyone knows how to use Zoom. Plus, we don't have to go anywhere. And trying to get more than one person in one physical location is like walking cats. So when people say, I want to record my podcast in person, another terrible idea. Why? Just easier. We don't need to. If we can just click a button from wherever we are, and you're on the left and your guest is on the right, or vice versa, your USB mic connects to your computer via USB. It's plug and play. Zoom recognizes you got good audio quality. You can't really control the audio quality of your guest, but what you can say is, hey, do you have a podcast mic? Do you have some sort of decent mic that you can use? If not, corded headphones with a little microphone work really, really well in a quiet place. You gotta coach your guest a little bit, because we assume people know and they just don't know. Okay, so coming up with an idea, a name, a brand, a strategy. When you come up with a name, get feedback on it, okay? The truth will set you free, but first it's really gonna make you angry, okay? But that's just growth, and that's feedback. And don't ask for feedback from people that always tell you what you want to hear. I had a mentor tell me one time, I'll never forget it, Sebastian, I can do one of 2 things, but I can't do both. And I said, what's that, Bruce? He said, I can tell you the truth, or I can tell you what you want to hear, but I can't do both. And I said, I'll take the truth. Walked out of his office crying after that mentoring session. So careful what you ask for, friends. So the name, the strategy, the brand, you'll put together what's called a podcast cover art. It's a logo for your show. Rosella would be happy to help you out with that process. And you can open up Canva, type in podcast cover art. There's a bazillion templates in there if you want to fiddle around with it and see what's possible. I always encourage that. Sit down and see if your ideas are valid. Come up with a name, come up with a strategy, get yourself a podcast mic, or don't. You can literally create a podcast on your phone and record it, produce it, monetize it, and all that fun stuff from your phone. There's an app called Anchor.fm, just like a boat anchor. Anchor.fm. Spotify just bought them for $1 bazillion, and it's a great solution, and it's free. Excellent price. It's got a web-based solution. It's also got an app. You can literally go in there and create a podcast. I'll help you put a cover art together. I'll get it into iTunes and Spotify, and it's free. So I always tell people, before you call me with, I don't know what I want to do, go back to the drawing board, figure out what you want to do, open up Anchor, record 5 or 10 episodes, get feedback on those episodes, and see if your ideas are actually valid. Remember, we always think our ideas are amazing until we actually get feedback from people that see our blind spots. So it's very, very important to do that. Because too many times people come to me and go, hey, I just started a podcast, what do you think? And I have to go rain on their parade. And I don't want to, and I don't do it, to make them feel like crap, but they asked. So I'm gonna tell them, because I don't want to be negligent in the feedback that I'm giving them. But there's always a better way to be able to do this. Now, my entire process of how I help people start a podcast, I've documented through the means of writing a book. So shameless plug, you can pick up a copy of my book called Podcasts Suck, anywhere books are sold, Amazon. And if you read the book and actually do what it says, you're gonna have everything you need in order to start a podcast. And if you have a problem, just flip over the back cover, there's a QR code, and you can get and connect with myself or my team, and I can answer any questions that you have. But as far as your initial concept, I don't want to take a deep dive into starting a podcast. We want to float on the surface a little bit. Valid idea, name, decent microphone of some sorts, even if it's a corded headphones for your cell phone. And podcast cover art. And again, Anchor helps out with all this, Canva helps out with this, Rosella helps out with all this. And then actually starting and figuring out, is this valid? Is this gonna work? Do I enjoy it? Imagine that. I can tell you this, if it feels like work, you're gonna quit. That's just how it is with anything. If it feels like work, I'm gonna quit. I mean, I live my life by that, but now I'm like, this kind of feels like work. I don't know if I wanna do that or not. Most people are like, well, that's what people do. Things are changing. I mean, it is possible to live your life. Somebody said a long time ago, Sebastian, if you want a lifestyle business, you have to have a lifestyle. I don't know. Never thought about that. Since then, I've never worked past 3 p.m. ever, and I cruise into the office somewhere between 8:30 and 10. That's just how I roll. I need time to live, I need time to create, and guess what? I've got my entire business and life in the palm of my hand. If I really need to answer an email, take a sales call, talk to a client, totally doable on here. So this isn't a get your life together talk. This is a get your podcast idea together conversation. Now, a few of you may already be podcasters. Show of hands, any podcasters in the room? We've got 2, we've got 3. Great, fire that way up. Excellent. So, is yours called Crack Me Up? You're sorry. I'm here all week, folks. Try to feel. Tip your bartenders. Yeah. I was just making sure everybody was paying attention then. I was, because when she introduced such as a chiropractor. All right, so there's some existing podcasters. Hats off on starting a podcast. I tried it with a few of you about that. But maybe there's a few of you that don't have a podcast, but you've been thinking about starting one, and you're like, I have a name. I did a photo shoot for the cover art. I have an idea of what I want to do with it. I know what I want to talk about. I have no idea how the process works. That you're a little bit more advanced in the process of starting it, and you should really start honing in. You got 2 options. Do it yourself. Download Anchor, go through that whole process, start there, get 25 episodes in. You can change to another podcast hosting account, and if you really want to, or hire somebody. And I'm not saying hire me, I'm just anybody that can help get you to the finish line and make your life easier as far as starting a podcast is concerned, is who you want to have a conversation with on there. People hire us because I get you there faster. That's it. You can start a podcast this weekend. I can represent myself in court too, but it's strongly recommended that I do not, I could also change the oil in my car, but I don't like to get dirty, so I drive around the corner and pay $50 and it's done. So I always say you can't put a price tag on convenience. So if you've got that burning desire to really want to start, and you have zero desire to go and figure it out, go hire somebody. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, well then let's roll our sleeves up and figure out what's possible here. But I know one thing, having a podcast is the ultimate networking tool. And every single one of you are in this room for one reason. Yeah, we support the chamber. The chamber's amazing. It is the best chamber in Miami. But we're here to network. We're here to build new relationships. We're here to further our business, further our life. I have built my entire brand over the past 12 years in this city from carefully cultivated relationships and like crazy ideas that people actually saw and believed in on here. Networking makes the world go round. Networking is your net worth. I mean, I can go on and on with the isms of networking, but podcasting is the ultimate networking tool. Let me give you an example. So I'm sure I'll meet a majority of you after we're done here today, and if anybody said I want to start a podcast, I'd probably say, what do you do? Get a little bit more information about you, and I'd invite you on my podcast. Come over to the studio, do the whole dog and pony show. And I'm building rapport by default because I made it all about you. I told your story. I got you on my podcast. I'm introducing you to my network. And if you've been anywhere remotely close to starting a podcast, guess what? I'm your guy. And it works over and over and over. And that's what we teach. That's what we teach the podcast launch. A podcast is cool, but what do you want the podcast to do? Eventually, you want to create a podcast that allows you to have conversations with people that will buy something from you. Eventually. You don't have to have that strategy right out of the gates. Sometimes it's the fit, sometimes it's not. I use it. It's one of our main sales generators, being able to say, hey, listen, high-profile individuals, people that I meet at events, people that fellow speakers. Anytime I want to connect with somebody further, I'd love to get you on the podcast because it's a lot easier. I'd love to get you on the phone and tell you what I do. mean, yeah, you and 100 other people. When I get you on the podcast, well, that's a little different. They don't see me coming. They won't see you coming either, which is great. It's a very transparent way of being able to make brand new connections. So when I say it changes your life and your business, it does. Carefully cultivated relationships that further your life and your business. Number 2, it's access. It's a foot in the door. You're just thought of and looked at differently. It's like doctors. We just look at them different because we're like, well, I'm not a doctor. It's just a different thought process of where, because we know they put in that extra work to get where it is and they also, work on humans. So that's a rare example on it, but we look at people differently that are doing things outside the norm. There's not a room full of podcasters here. So when someone says, I own a chiropractic business here in Miami and I've got a podcast, I'm like, wow, I want to get adjusted and I also want to listen to your podcast. You see how that works? Just the difference of where it's at. We were just talking to our sponsors before the event started here, and then I got a buddy sent me an article that Apollo Bank here in Miami just launched a podcast, and I was surprised. I was like, a bank launching a podcast? That's a great indication of where we're at with all of this. A bank is starting a podcast. Attorneys are starting a podcast. I mean, I hear wild stories all the time of podcasts being started and ideas, and I'm like, I never even thought about that before. How many people listen to podcasts in this room? Okay, cool. A good amount of people. Yeah, it's the new radio. No one, listen to me, no one is rushing to their car to turn on the FM dial, to hear untargeted ads talking over the same song over and over and over again. I grew up listening to the radio. I'm deeply passionate about it, specifically in South Florida. I love Paul Casanova, was one of my dear friends, and I grew up listening to Paul and Young Ron on the radio. But that ship has sailed. He doesn't think so. But he's also starting a podcast. Okay, so oddly enough, how it all works out. I grew up listening to young Paul and Ron in the morning, and now Paulie's starting his podcast. I know that because I texted him to get on my podcast, and he's like, let's do it as soon as I launch my podcast. And I was like, podcast. So no one's excited to listen to the radio anymore, and podcasting is slowly replacing the radio as we know it. I think satellite radio might have a little bit of longevity left to it. I enjoy my Sirius radio in my car. You don't have a choice. You buy a car these days, like Sirius radio, or you just get the ad over and over again. You're like, fine, take my $10 a month. Sirius radio is one thing, but here's the thing about podcasting and any of the way that we live, our ease of use. Anybody bought? I'm a Mac user. I don't know about the rest of you weirdos, but I'm a Mac user, and every time I buy a new Apple product, all I have to do is log in with my iCloud, and boom, all my stuff is there. Incredible. I don't know how you PC people survive. But that's just one example of where we're at, of being able to buy a new piece of technology, log in, and everything's there. Here's my prediction for where we're going as far as YouTube, podcasting, and we're already there, just not everywhere. You board an airplane, you sit down, you got the screen right in front of you, you log in with your Apple ID, you log in with your Spotify ID, you log in with your YouTube ID, and boom, all of your preferences, your account, everything right there in front of you. It's removing all the friction from consuming what we want to consume. The control has been put back in the consumer's lap, and it will continue to be that way as we enter into this Web3 frontier with the metaverse and NFTs and crypto and a whole different conversation around it. Things have shifted. You understand, we spent the past 10 years being controlled by Facebook and Google. They call the shots because they own the data. All of that's changing and shifting back to the consumer, which is a good thing for us. Why do I bring this up? Well, next time somebody's on an airplane and they're like, hey, I want to listen to your podcast. You're like, cool, pull up my podcast called Cracked Up Chiropractic and subscribe to it. When you log in on your, you're going to rebrand that thing, watch. And when you log in with all your features, guess what? The content that we want to consume is right there. And when you listen to podcasts, the ads that are being told are resonating. How much time do we have? Pretty good?
We can open up for Q&A.
Q&A? Okay, good. Excellent. I was about out of things to talk about. That's a total lie. Total lie. All right, yeah, questions, please.
One thing I think is missing in your presentation is how do you get people to actually listen to you?
Record episodes, get started, stay in the game, remain consistent, stay focused.
Yeah, but how are they going to find you?
Well,
Or
people do search for specific topics and what they're looking for within Apple and Spotify, the main two platforms people are listening to. But from there, you should be creating micro content from the archive content of your video and your audio of your podcast, and posting on Instagram stories and Facebook stories and Instagram Reels and LinkedIn, and saying, hey, here's episode 25 with Sebastian Rusk. Click the link below to listen to the episode. It allows you to post a piece of social media content, and informs people of a new episode, and it makes them aware of the podcast. It's a long, long journey of being able to accumulate thousands and thousands of people listening to your podcast. And I never sell people on the idea that you should launch a podcast because you're going to get 1 million downloads. Who cares if you get 100 downloads? If it changes the way that you're doing business and builds new relationships and allows you to achieve your objectives and allows you to serve others, who cares who's listening? But to answer your question, the way to get people to listen is recording episodes, staying consistent with it, getting the word out through social media, finding strategic guests that will share the word to, and making it top of funnel. Everything you talk about marketing-wise is podcasting. Everything else is secondary after that. Does that make sense?
And you have to pay to be on Apple Podcast?
You do not have to pay to be on Apple. It is, especially if you use Anchor, it's free. If you chose a podcast hosting account like Simplecast we use, it's like $15 a month. That's where all of your podcast files live, and that connects to Apple and Spotify to handle distribution. Nobody uploads to Apple or Spotify. You upload your podcast host, and it gets distributed everywhere else. Yes?
So I have the same question as Monique, but my other question too is, what are you seeing in terms of demographics of those that are listening to podcasts? Where in some business that is trying to target a certain different demographic that doesn't listen to podcasts, so how does that translate into wanting to sell something to a demographic that's not necessarily in that socioeconomic group? So I don't know if I made myself clear, but
Not really, but I think I got what you're saying.
So what are you seeing in terms of the listener? What age and demographic?
That really depends on who's, it's about 50-50 for my audience, and I have a business podcast, I've got a couple of mainly business podcasts, but it's about 60-40 male, female at any given time. Demographics, the majority are in the United States. Your podcast hosting account gives you all of the analytics of where your listeners are coming from, but setting out and saying we want to target that specific demographic right when you're first getting started is not the smartest, because you want to be able to cast your net as wide as you possibly can, because maybe you're going to meet new people, build new relationships, and target a whole brand new demographic. You can figure out, once you start recording episodes and figure out who's actually listening, then you're able to navigate through, well, maybe we should be doing this, or maybe we should be doing that. The micro content that we're creating, maybe we can run ads on Instagram and Facebook that target our demographic. So even though the majority of our listeners aren't in our specific demographic, if you want to attract the masses, you got to go to where the masses are and direct them to where you want to be. And that's very easy to do these days with technology and content.
How about the time? So I know 90 days to get the podcast up, but what are you seeing in terms of your objective of getting new clients and selling your product through a podcast? How long does it take? Because it seems you got to cast a wide net, you got to just kind of go everywhere. So how long are people taking to get to that point where, hey, I made X amount of sales because of my podcast? Was it like 3 months, 6 months?
It could be a week, it could be 3 months, it could be a year. It all depends on what the strategy and the content is, what people are doing. I have 900 different stories that have come out of me creating content, the stuff that I've been able to do, that tracing it back to, well, I podcasted for 9.5 months, and after that I was able to convert 3 clients into sales. It's an ongoing process of new opportunities. I get booked to speak, I get consulting gigs, I have different opportunities for my personal brand and also on the agency side on here. So I use myself as an example because I use this specific model. But I always tell people, starting a podcast will change your life and your business. I just can't tell you how yet, because I'd be lying to you. I just know that it will, because I've lived it for the past 12 years. There's so many different opportunities that are there. I know we're so accustomed to, well, if I invest in this, and that many flyers go out, my phone rings 15 times, I know that I'll sell at least 3 of those people that call me. That is the old school way of thinking, and that ship has sailed. Go look at TV, radio, print, traditional mediums out there. Do they complement new media? Absolutely, but they don't work nearly as good as they used to. Why? Well, times are a-changing. There's never been a more exciting time to be alive and an easier way to market or spread the word with your business right now. You've just got to be willing to go into the unknown. Say, you know what, and I tell every single client that starts with us, I want you to put the blinders on. We have a 12-month agreement, not to lock them in for 12 months, but to get the blinders on for 12 months, to get them focused. And I say, if you'll give this a minimum of 12 to 18 months before giving yourself permission to throw the towel in, I guarantee you your life will be radically changed as well as your business. But again, I can't tell you how, because I'd be lying to you. I have no idea. I don't predict the future. I wish I could. Yes?
Well, there's so many professional podcasts out there, like BBC, NPR, Gresham College, by professionals. Why would anybody want to listen to some crap that an amateur's talking about?
There's always one. Great question. I love this question. So, is there too many podcasts out there for me to start? No. You know why? Because there's only one you. There's only one person creating the content that you're creating, and your community is your community. Who gives a rip what everybody else is doing? Because it's your content and it's your community. Yeah, BBC and NPR and Inc. Magazine and Entrepreneur. Sure, there's a lot of Caller Daddy. So there's a ton of podcasts out there doing great things with great content out there, but it has nothing to do with the lane that you're in. You're creating content to pour into your community that you either already have or that you're growing and building. And that community is committed to you because they like you. You're doing something to them to provide value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just don't agree with you.
Hey, that's okay too. If we all agreed, it'd be a real boring world. Appreciate the question.
So the podcast originally was just audio. So based on your experience, what do you recommend to do, like just audio or jumping to the video podcast?
Another great question. So podcasts don't belong on YouTube. Another terrible, unpopular opinion. Yeah, I know. Here's the reason why. Hear me out on this. I'm a YouTube creator. I have been for the past 3 years. So I'm in the creator program. They pay me to post content on a monthly basis. It is the hardest piece of content that I create, but a couple things happen. Number one, I get a check from YouTube. That doesn't suck. Number two, people call me and they say, I just binge watched your whole channel, because that's what we do. And they're like, you're my guy. I want to hire you. Wait, you're the guy from the video? So YouTube works really great as far as YouTube strategy, creating content based on what YouTube wants. People go to YouTube for 2 reasons: to be entertained and to get their problems solved. If you can do both of those, winner, winner, chicken dinner all day long. When it comes to a podcast, there's enough work in and of itself to create a podcast, continue a podcast, and stay focused on growing the show, that when we throw a video component and say, hey, let's take the video archive of the podcast and let's turn it in, let's just post it on YouTube and hope somebody finds it. Hope's a terrible strategy. None of us are Justin Bieber. We're not gonna get discovered. I hate to burst your bubble. We're not gonna get discovered on YouTube. And maybe it would happen. 1 in a million shot. I just think it's time wasted that doesn't need to be wasted. Now here's what can be done. Record your podcast, start your podcast, get 25 or 50 episodes in, use the archived video and to create micro content. Maybe you can post, maybe you have a YouTube channel, you're posting YouTube shorts and Instagram reels and Instagram stories and stuff to be able to drive people to the podcast on here and add a visual component through your social media content. That totally works. Then as the show grows, you can start swinging for the fence and say, hey, well, maybe we'll bring a videographer in and somebody who understands YouTube, and they can record us recording the podcast, and then we can edit it accordingly based on what YouTube needs in order for their algorithm to work correctly and to have success on YouTube. So do video podcasts exist? Nope. But that's, again, a very unpopular opinion. And people throw that word around all the time. I gotta have a video. Not your guy. Can't help. Why? Because I want you to focus on one thing. We have a video component for the podcast. We're not going to start a video podcast. We're not doing videographers and this, that. You'll quit by in 2 months. And my goal is to keep you in the game, remove as much friction as possible, and help you stay focused. And when it's like, well, what about this? I'm like, yeah, right, back on track here. Does that make sense? Great question.
What percentage of decision makers would you say are like the professionals that are actually listening to podcasts that would actually be, I guess, is there any type of statistics that would be able, that are trackable, that we can actually see, depending on the industry, that would actually, I guess, gear to, how would we able to actually see, depending on your particular industry?
I guess the first thing would be to go to Apple Podcasts and pull up podcasts that would pertain to what you're doing. Do they even exist out there? And if they don't, well, ding, 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 that may be a great indication that you can blaze a new trail. Usually your demographics are male, female, location, age, and what platform they're listening from. That's usually the demographics your podcast hosting account is going to give you. Best thing to do is get in there and try it out. See what type of traction you can get. What have we always done that's worked? And what does that look like now to bring it on a podcast front? But I'm sorry to have a better answer for that. But I get what you're saying, because usually it's like, well, we're going to do marketing. We know direct mail works for specific professionals in this specific industry, and I know it can do it. Again, that ship has sailed. We don't have that information. It's readily available to us anymore. We're in a space now where we create the content, get it out there, get feedback, look at analytics, and then figure out where it goes. So it's kind of the opposite of the way things used to be. Does that make sense? Okay.
Last question.
Erica just threw down the hammer. Last question.
I think she's had her hands up for a while.
Okay, last two.
Me. Oh, I was gonna ask, you mentioned to do like one a week.
Yeah.
Is there a specific amount of time that you've noticed that works better?
30 minutes.
Another 30 minutes, okay.
So think about this. You pull up a podcast episode and it's 10 minutes long, you're like, I got that. You pull up an episode of Joe Rogan's, 3.5 hours, takes you a week to listen to, you're like, holy cow. I know it's probably a bad example, but again, it's a long podcast, so I want to use that example. But when you pull one up that's less than 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I got 10 minutes. I can listen to that. So I say 30 minutes or less. 20, 25 minutes is the sweet spot. Nobody's got the attention span, really, in the long form. Look, squirrel.
So when you open a business, you typically go to like Sunbiz, check the name, or you do a trademark, search. So is there a place that you go to see if the name that you selected has been taken? Like, is there one location?
iTunes, yeah. Just pull up Apple Podcast and type in the name. If it's already there, check when the last episode was recorded. If it was June of 2016, the name's readily available. If they recorded something last Tuesday, probably not. Time to go back to the drawing board.
So just Apple, even though there's just...
Yeah, I mean, I guess, of course, you would do the normal protocol of checking trademarks and the name that you're choosing on there. I would start with Apple. Is there already something out there? Number two, is there a trademark on it? You obviously don't want to come up with any challenges with that when you're creating your name and brand on there. All right, cool. Well, I feel like, okay, sure, one more. So I'm breaking all the rules, Erica.
I'm sorry, you've been raising my hand since the beginning. Do we have to stick to one topic? Because, I'm a hairdresser, but I like business, I like spirituality, I like to talk about so many different things because we're not just one thing. So do we have to stick to one topic when we decide to do our podcast?
Well, you don't have to do anything. You get to do whatever you like. But to my point earlier about the variety show, I want to get my girlfriends together. We drink wine. We're really funny. We can talk about politics. We can talk about guys. We can talk about shopping. Terrible idea. I never advise people to go and do that. Let's just figure out one thing that you can get really excited about, and maybe there's other complementary things that you could talk about around that topic of what your thing is. But to be all over the map and to be everything, it's like being everything to everybody. Everybody's not your target market. Every person is not your person, right? Same applies with your content. So find something you can get excited about, and what are some other things that could complement that?
And Gary Vee does promote recording your podcast because he likes to get the content from that.
Yeah, he's got a team of 25. It's a little different. Just for Team Gary Vee. I know Gary a long time. I got my start with him, so I've seen this whole evolution. But he used to do it himself before he had D-Rock. And then around there is a team of 25 makes content real easy. So, ladies, the three gentlemen in the room, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you.